and welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to make an apron because you wanted to see one as I asked in my last video. So here's the design I made some time ago and I'm going to make this. So here's what the pattern piece is going to look like. You can see that it is symmetrical, so there is a line in the middle and the two sides of the apron will look the same. And I also have the measurements here. Mine is going to be 30 by 50 centimeters. And here's the frill that is going to be on the edge. You can skip this if you want, but I think it's cute. And of course the waist belt that you're going to attach to the top of the apron. So yeah, you can just copy my measurements if you are roughly my size, but of course you can customize them. So I'm going to show you how to make the pattern piece. So pretend that this paper is a pattern paper or any paper that you're going to draft a pattern on. So taking this ruler, I'm going to mark out the length of the apron. So again, you can customize this to any length you'd like it to be. In my case, it's 30 centimeters. So when you have those marks, I'm going to draw one more line, and this is going to be at the widest part of the apron. So since the apron is kind of round shaped, it's going to have one point that is going to be the widest, so measure out that one, and depending on what shape you want your apron, this can vary. So next step is to draw a line where at the top and the bottom and measure out how wide you want it to be at the front, so you can measure this on yourself. And always remember that at the fold it needs to be at 90 degrees, always at the fold, because it's going to look weird when you cut it out if it's not 90 degrees. So at the top here you can see that I'm drawing it at a curve, and this is because we want to have some sort of curve here to mimic the shape of the body when it's worn, because the body is round and we want it to sit nicely. So then you can just go ahead and draft out the shape of your apron, and it can be any shape you like, but mine looks like this. So you can see it's cut out and it has the middle piece, and I'm going to cut it in two pieces, like this. So you have two pieces, and the next step is going to be how to cut your pattern piece in the actual fabric. So this paper here is going to be the fabric, and I'm going to show you how to lay out your pattern pieces, because we are going to gather this apron, to make it more frilly. So in my case, I'm going to have 40 centimeters of gathering allowance because I want it to be really puffy, but if you want it to be less puffy, you can make this measurement smaller, or if you want a super puffy apron, you can even make it bigger. Depends on what you like. So drawing the gather allowance out, I'm going to place my pattern pieces on each side like this and make sure that they are aligned. And then you're just going to go ahead and cut out your pattern piece for the apron. So it's going to look something like this. And of course, you saw me fold the paper in the first cut, and you're basically going to end up with a front and a back piece like this. So just to demonstrate how it's going to look, I'm going to try to fold the paper here just so that you can get an idea of how it's going to look later. So yeah, it's going to be gathered here at the top. I'm just going to start cutting out my pattern pieces here in a kind of ugly montage of me just pinning, and yeah, just so I can show you how it looks when I make it. I don't know if it's helpful. You can see that I have my rulers here and I'm trying to lay out my pattern pieces and measure the correct amount of space between them and just pin them down as I go. I know it's kind of hard to see because I'm working with a cotton fabric here, and I would highly suggest that you use cotton for this project if you are a beginner. I have made one with organza, as you saw in the thumbnail, the AP apron that is made of organza. I really wanted to recreate that one, and I did do that at first. But I did think it was very complicated to deal with the fabric because organza is one of the most evil fabrics you will encounter. So if you are a beginner, please use cotton. So here's all the pattern pieces. You can see that I have my waistband and the frills here laid out. The frills are going to be a little thicker than the waistband, but of course it's just preference. So here I'm just showing you the frills. It is folded in half, so yeah, you can see that I have cut it, so I just fold it like this. So I have no raw edges on my frill. So starting with the frills, I'm going to just fold it in half with the right sides out. And we are going to zigzag stitch this first because it's better that way, and here's how that looks. You can see it's nicely zigzagged. That way it won't fray. And the next step here is just to iron the frills down so that you have a nice and flat piece. And it's going to look like this. You can see the cotton is nice and stiff, so you get this really precise kind of edge. So the next thing is going to be to actually run the straight stitch, but make it really, really long, so that you have these long stitches running at the top. So just grabbing one of the threads, you're going to pull it, and that way you're going to gather the fabric nicely. And of course you can choose how long you want or how much volume you want. So if you want really, voluminous frills, you can do a really long strip. And I forgot to mention, but I actually sewed my two parts of my frill together before I did this long straight stitch, because that way I don't have to deal with sewing them together later, so that I have one really long strip here that I'm just going to gather. And be patient, it takes a lot of time, and don't pull too hard because you might break your thread, and that's really sad when it happens. So please take it a little bit at a time and work from both edges. And this is how my frill looks now. It's kind of squiggly and weird looking, but I promise it's going to look nice later. So taking this and one of my pattern pieces, I'm going to lay this down and pin it with the frill facing inwards and the edges pinned together like this. And make sure to distribute your frills evenly. So the first thing I'm going to do here is zigzag these two pattern pieces together and have an opening at the top of the apron, because that's where the waistband is going to go. So don't sew it all the way, just have some allowance here as I show you. And also pin the frills nicely if you want them to stick out. You could sew them into the apron if you wanted. And then I'm going to lay over my second pattern piece and just sew a straight stitch, or in my case I have a serger, so I'm going to serge all around the edge to make it nice and clean. I really love my serger because the edge just is always perfect, and it really helps out a lot when you have this kind of projects with frills and stuff. So turning this inside out, it should look something like this, and you can just go and kind of pull at the fabric, trying to make it straight. And we are going to do a top stitch on top of the apron. And you can see here that it's still open at the top. So I'm going to do a top stitch along the edge of the apron just to make sure that it stays in place and looks neat. Something like this. Just sewing really close at the edge. And now we are going to zigzag together the top of the apron, and it should look something like this. You can see where the frill ends. And we are also going to do the same long straight stitch here so that we can gather. And don't forget to mark the middle of your apron, because you want both. You want to have, you know, some symmetry in your apron, so it helps a lot if you know that both sides are gathered the same amount. So I always pin the middle if I have a middle anytime I sew stuff. So yeah. Taking my pattern pieces for reference, I'm going to check that I have, you know, the right measurements here, and just pull and adjust so that it fits my pattern piece. So next step is going to be the waist belt. This one is also folded in half. So I'm just going to fold it and sew around. But I'm going to leave a hole at the middle because that is where the apron is going to go. So again, marking the middle of this piece as well. I'm going to leave some space for the apron. So you can just go ahead and measure out about how much you will need for the apron to fit in there, and pin down a little marker so that you know how far you can go. And then just sew around. So here is how it looks. I used my serger for this part as well, even if it is a little clumsy here, but that's okay, it doesn't really matter. And here is the edge, and I'm just going to snip off this tip here because it's going to make it look much cleaner when you fold it inside out. So then I'm just going to take my hands and yeah, fold it inside out, and this takes a lot of time, but yeah, it does work, but you need some patience, okay? And you can also take the tip of a pen or the back of a pen and just, you know, tug at the edges to make those corners look better. It's really hard to do that with your fingers, so just take a pencil and poke until you have some straight and nice corners at the end of the waist belt. And yeah, it does take a lot of time. You could leave the edges open, you know, at the ends and just fold it inside out that way, but yeah, it doesn't really matter how you do it. You just need to have, you know, a nice belt, so do it however you prefer. So now this one just looks kind of wonky, so I'm going to iron this down as well. So now we just need to assemble this by pinning this down to one of the sides of the waist belt. You can see it's open here, so I'm going to stitch down one side first. And really handy to have this middle marker because you know it's always placed in the middle. So just go ahead and pin it down. And just sew it in place. And when that is done, you can take the other side of the waistband and just fold it over and fold in the edge so that it looks nice and neat, and pin that one down as well. And remember to close this hole here as well, because I did open a little bit too much space actually, because I wanted to be sure that my apron fit. So I'm going to pin down that hole in the waistband as well and sew all the way of my waistband so that it's kind of top stitched all the way on the lower part. You can see I'm trying to show you here with my fingers. And that is it for this apron. And here's how it looks. I think it's really cute and the same shape as the AP one, so it's not that hard to make. I think it's something that any beginner could make, because it's really simple pattern pieces and I think it's pretty rewarding. And again, you could make this in organza if you want to have, you know, the see-through kind of thing, because it's cute to see the pattern, you know, of the print through your apron. But I think this is a good starting point, and if you know how to make this, you might actually want to make one in organza as well in the future, if you want a little bit of pain in your life. So here you can see I'm just showing it off on my mannequin, and I actually sewed this dress and the blouse as well. And yeah, I'm open to making more tutorials if you'd like that in the future. But in the meantime, you can go and watch my other videos and subscribe to my channel for more content in the future. And comment something nice below if you liked my apron, and subscribe if you'd like that. And I will see you in my next video. Bye bye!